Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to provide you with an update as to what's happening in Turkey, and specifically what's happening with the Turkish military. If you've been following the channel, I'm sure you'll be aware that Turkey has taken a neutral stance with regards to its position on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is interesting because Turkey is a member of NATO, and the vast majority of other countries in NATO have come out against Russia's invasion and actually have imposed heavy sanctions against Russia. But Turkey has a long-standing trading relationship with Russia, and President Erdogan has met with President Putin on a number of occasions over the course of the last 18 months. The first of those meetings were to organise a grain deal to allow Ukraine's grain to be exported across the Black Sea to countries that needed those food supplies. But they've also had other meetings about trade, and President Erdogan has stated that Turkey wants to increase the level of trade that it's doing with Russia. Now, interestingly, Turkey has the second largest military force out of all of the NATO countries, so it's an important power from a military perspective. And Turkey and Russia have found themselves on the opposite side of a number of military conflicts over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. And most recently, I reported on the situation in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan and its neighbour Armenia have a long-standing conflict with regards to an area of Azerbaijan that is predominantly populated by Armenians. Now, Turkey has close relations with Azerbaijan and has provided military support for that conflict, whilst Russia has been supporting Armenia. And as I reported recently, Azerbaijan has now taken this area by force, and we've seen around 50,000 Armenians leaving the area permanently. And one of the most interesting things about that conflict was that Russia didn't offer any form of military support to Armenia as a result of the fact that it's fully committed in Ukraine right now. All of its military power and all of its financial investment into military is going into that war. And so it really wasn't in a position to be able to help Armenia. And I think that's one of the really fascinating things that's come out of that conflict, and really throws open the question as to whether or not Russia is in a position to be able to support any further military conflicts. Now, on that issue, Turkey has a long-standing conflict with the Kurds, and particularly the PKK, which Turkey have deemed to be a terrorist organisation. Now, the Kurdish people are based across a number of different countries, including Turkey, Syria, Iran and Iraq. And in today's video, I want to talk about the latest airstrikes that Turkey have launched into Iraq as a consequence of a bombing that took place recently in the capital city. Now, here's a quick question for you, because we're all trying to learn things and improve our education. Do you know what the capital city of Turkey is? Well, if you said Istanbul, you'd be wrong, because it's Ankara. So in today's video, I'll have a look at the details of that bombing, as well as the military offensive that Turkey have launched in Iraq. I'll give you some more details on the conflict between Turkey and the Kurds, how that's arisen, what the situation is with regards to the Kurds that are based in Iraq, what Russia's position is in all of this. And then finally today, I'll wrap up with my summary as to what I think the potential is for more military conflict to occur over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, and whether there's any potential for Russia to be drawn in on the opposite side to Turkey. But before we get started on all of that, once again, I'd like to say thank you so much for all the great comments that you've been posting recently. Really appreciate all of those. And if you'd like to see more face-to-face videos like this, including ones that I'm not posting on YouTube, and if you're looking to avoid all of the annoying adverts that you get on YouTube, then please check out my Patreon channel. However, if you don't like Patreon and you'd still like to support the channel, please have a look below where you'll find links to buymeacoffee.com, as well as YouTube's super thanks and membership scheme.
Turkey's government said 2 terrorists carried out a bomb attack in front of the Interior Ministry buildings in Ankara on Sunday. It said that one died in the explosion and the other was neutralised by authorities there. A recording of CCTV footage showed a person getting out of a vehicle and running towards the government building, followed by clouds of smoke from an explosion. A senior Turkish official told Reuters the attackers had hijacked the vehicle and killed its driver in Kayseri, a city 161 miles southeast of Ankara, before carrying out the attack. 2 police officers were also wounded in the incident. Police announced they would also be carrying out controlled explosions for suspicious package incidents in other parts of Ankara.
A news agency close to the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as the PKK, said that the group has claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing in Ankara, Turkey. A statement from the AFN news agency said the PKK planned the bombing to coincide with the opening of Turkish Parliament. It said that the attack was carried out by a team linked to the Immortals Battalion group. The PKK is designated as a terrorist organisation by Turkey, the United States and the European Union. The suicide attack occurred hours before the Turkish Parliament was set to reopen after its 3-month summer recess, with an address by President Erdogan, who said the blast was the latest attempt to inflict terror on the Turks. In a statement he said, "Those who threaten the peace and security of citizens have not achieved their goals and never will." The incident came almost a year after 6 people were killed and 81 wounded in an explosion in a busy pedestrian street in central Istanbul, which Turkey blamed on Kurdish fighters. The bomb was the first in Ankara since March 2016, when 37 people were killed after a bomb-laden car exploded at a crowded central transport hub. In direct response to the recent bombing, Turkey has carried out airstrikes in northern Iraq, which have destroyed 20 targets belonging to the Kurdish militant group PKK. In a statement on X, a Turkish government spokesperson said air operations were carried out against terrorist targets in the Metina, Hakkuk, Gandhi and Gara regions in the north of Iraq at 9 p.m. on the 1st of October. A total of 20 targets consisting of caves, bunkers and warehouses used by and considered to contain the terrorists responsible were destroyed. Many terrorists were neutralised by using the maximum amount of domestic and national ammunition in the operations carried out. The Turkish armed forces, coming from the heart of our noble nation, will continue the fight against terrorism with determination for the survival and security of our homeland and nation as in the past until there is not a single terrorist left. They added that measures were taken not to harm civilians in the attack. A spokesperson for President Erdogan added, "With these operations, the terrorist organisation has suffered another major blow." As the president clearly emphasised, the enemies of Turkey will suddenly feel the breath of our state security forces on their necks one night. In a process where the fight against terrorism is so sensitive, effective and successful, it is of great importance that the national and international public be vigilant against disinformation activities, especially those attempted to be carried out by the terrorist organisation. In response to these military attacks, Iraqi President Abdul Latif Rashid said that his country does not accept repeated Turkish strikes or the presence of Turkish bases in the Kurdistan region and hopes to come to an agreement with Turkey to solve this problem. It's estimated that there are between 25 and 30 million Kurds, mostly living in Turkey, Syria, Iraq and Iran, who do not have an official homeland and continue to seek recognition, political rights, autonomy and independence. At the end of World War I, the Treaty of Sèvres was drafted to deal with the dissolution and partition of the Ottoman Empire. The treaty bolstered Kurdish national aspirations by providing for a referendum to decide the issue of the Kurdish homeland. However, the Treaty of Sèvres was rejected by the new Turkish Republic, and a new treaty, the Treaty of Lausanne, was negotiated and signed in 1923, which gave control of the entire Anatolian Peninsula, or Asia Minor, to the new Turkish Republic, including the Kurdish homeland in Turkey. There was no provision in the new treaty for a referendum for Kurdish independence or autonomy. Kurdish hopes for an autonomous region and independent state were therefore dashed for the next few decades. This map shows the location of the 6 major Kurdish factions that are fighting for independence for the Kurdish people. As you can see from this diagram, the PKK is officially located in Iraq, along with the PUK, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, the KNC, the Kurdish National Council, along with the KDP, the Kurdish Democratic Party. The KNC, the Kurdish National Council, has a foothold in both Iraq and Syria, whereas the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and the YPG, the Democratic Union Party, are located primarily in Syria. And it's predominantly in Syria where Russia has been supporting the Kurdish fighters. And that's causing major problems with Turkey, who believe that there is a close affiliation between the YPG in Syria and the PKK in Iraq. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, is a Kurdish militant political organisation and armed guerrilla movement which historically has operated throughout Kurdistan but is now primarily based in the mountainous Kurdish regions of southeastern Turkey and northern Iraq. The origins of the PKK date back to the early 1970s. However, in the mid-1990s, the organisation changed its aim from independence to a demand for equal rights and Kurdish autonomy within the Turkish state. The PKK has been involved in armed clashes with Turkish security forces since 1979, but the full-scale insurgency did not begin until the 15th of August 1984, when the PKK announced a Kurdish uprising. Since that conflict began, more than 40,000 people have died, the majority of which have been Kurdish civilians. In 2013, the PKK declared a ceasefire against Turkey and began slowly withdrawing its fighters to Iraqi Kurdistan as part of a peace process with the Kurdish state. In July 2015, the ceasefire collapsed a few days after a suicide bombing killed at least 33 young activists in the mainly Kurdish town of Surak near the Syrian border. And this incident led to a series of other terrorist attacks in Turkey. During a series of bloody incidents in 2015 and 2016, Kurdish and other groups either claimed or were blamed for several attacks in major Turkish cities. In July 2015, more than 30 people, mostly young students, were killed in a suicide bomber attack in the town of Surak near the Syrian border. In September 2015, 15 police officers were killed in 2 bombings in the eastern Turkish provinces of Mardin and Igdir. In October 2015, twin bombings in Ankara killed more than 100 people outside the city's main train station. In January 2016, a suicide bomber killed at least 10 people, most of them German tourists, in Istanbul. In February of that year, 28 people were killed and dozens wounded in Ankara when a car laden with explosives detonated next to military buses near the Armed Forces headquarters, parliament and other government buildings. In March 2016, 37 people were killed when a bomb-laden car exploded at a crowded transport hub in the heart of Ankara. A suicide bomber killed 4 in a busy shopping district in Istanbul. In May 2016, 16 people were killed in southeast Turkey when explosives that were intended to be used in a suicide bombing detonated in a village in southeast Turkey. In June 2016, a triple suicide bombing and a gun attack killed 45 people and wounded more than 160 at Istanbul's main airport. In August, the suicide bomber carried out an attack at a wedding party in the southeast of Turkey that killed 51 people. And the suicide truck bombing at police headquarters killed at least 11 and wounded dozens. In December 2016, twin bombings, one planted in a car and the other strapped to a suicide bomber, killed 44 people, most of them police officers, and wounded more than 150 outside an Istanbul soccer stadium. A car bomb killed 13 soldiers and wounded 56 when it tore through a bus carrying off-duty military personnel in the central city of Kayseri. And 39 people were killed after a lone gunman opened fire in a packed Istanbul nightclub. And in January 2017, a Turkish police officer and a courthouse employee were killed by a car bomb in the city of Izmir, while at least 10 people were wounded. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video to bring you up to speed as to what was happening in Turkey, and particularly looking at Turkey's military offensives. Because as I mentioned at the start of the video, Turkey has the second largest military force out of all of the members of NATO, just behind the USA, and is therefore a really important player and can have a lot of influence into these military conflicts. As we all know, Turkey has taken a neutral stance with regards to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and that's putting them firmly in the position of being an ally of Russia. And Russia right now needs as many friends as it can get, particularly from a financial perspective. And one of the things that President Putin floated recently to President Erdogan was for Turkey to become a gas hub and to sell Russian gas to the rest of Europe, branded as Turkish gas. Now, Turkey is apparently still considering setting itself up as a gas hub, but may not use Russian gas, may take gas from Azerbaijan and other countries. And Azerbaijan is a really interesting case study for the relationship between the two nations. As we talked about right at the start of the video, there's been a long-standing conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, with Turkey supporting Azerbaijan and Russia supporting Armenia. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, that conflict has now ended, with Azerbaijan taking full control of the contested area. And one of the reasons it was able to do that was that Russia offered no form of military support to Armenia, and therefore Armenia had to concede that long-standing position. And the reason that Russia didn't offer any support is that it can't afford to do so at the moment, either from a military perspective, because all of its military weapons and personnel are devoted to what's happening in Ukraine, or from a financial point of view, because the Russian economy is suffering severely at the moment from the sanctions. It's posting heavy deficits and having to fund those deficits from its national wealth fund. So the last thing that President Putin wants right now is to get involved in any further third-party military conflicts where it's merely supporting somebody else. And this obviously opens up the potential for other conflicts to reignite. If countries no longer believe that Russia is going to step in and support their opposition, then they may decide that this is the right time to reinvade that area and take over, as Azerbaijan did recently. Now, specifically with regards to Turkey, it's on the opposite side of conflicts against Russia in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. As we talked about earlier in the video, Turkey recently hit 20 targets that it's had in its sights, all based in Iraq. Now, those targets were hit as a direct result of a bombing that took place in Ankara. But clearly President Erdogan did not have a second's hesitation in terms of authorising those airstrikes. And it will be interesting to see whether there's any form of retaliation. Now, Russia's support for the Kurds is predominantly focused on what's happening in Syria rather than Iraq. But generally speaking, Russia has been supportive of the Kurds over the course of the last 10 years or so. And it'll be really interesting to see whether any form of support is offered in Iraq or whether the Kurds are left completely isolated. And I think the most likely scenario is that Russia won't want to provide any support. Firstly, it doesn't have the ability to because it doesn't have any spare manpower or cash. And secondly, it may not want to upset the relationship with Turkey. And I think that second point is really interesting in changing the balance of power as it sits right now. Historically, Russia has been a powerhouse from a military perspective. When Russia gets involved in conflicts with smaller nations, they tend to have a very strong influence. But what we're seeing right now is that Russia is all in on Ukraine and therefore isn't in a position to be able to do anything else around the world. And I think there's a real possibility that as the realisation of this spreads all across the globe, we could see powers who've been fighting against Russian-backed forces suddenly winning control because Russia simply won't be there to back those nations up. So the overall summary of today's video is that as a result of the recent bombing that took place in Ankara, Turkey have launched military offensives into Iraq, and it's possible that there could be more offensives taking place in Iraq and maybe also in Syria and Libya over the course of the next 3 to 6 months if the forces on the ground there decide that Russia is no longer supporting their opposition, and therefore that resistance has been weakened and is vulnerable. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments on this or related stories. Hopefully you found today's video useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.